Hey, this is Coach Jim coming at you with coach points from Game 9, last week's game against Addison Blazers at their place. Um, we won this game 21-12. I think the coaches may have mentioned this. The site of this field, they used to launch test missiles at, and that's I guess what this stand thing is for. But pretty fitting considering how well we were hitting the ball. We hit a lot of missiles ourselves. Scored a ton of runs. Again, the game got a little sloppy there in the middle innings. We made a few errors, but we were able to close it out and win with pretty relative ease. But there's still a lot of things I want to pick up on, and similar to the Bartlett game, things we can clean up on and improve on in the future. So, as I mentioned, we were hitting the ball really hard. Here's a great example. Rich leading off the inning with this triple. You see the right fielder lost the ball in the sun, so important to have those sunglasses. And even after he realized the ball had kind of gotten past him, he didn't make any attempt to go for the ball, which was a little odd. But in any case, and Luke knocked him in. Rich in a little bit later. Here's a play. Second and third, throwback from the catcher, wide of the pitcher. This is why we like to see the shortstop at second base pinch in here, make sure we back up that throw, especially when we have runners on base. So we just want to get in the habit of that. The other thing to note is you see Luke's kind of got his back turned as the throw's coming. So we want to take that good secondary lead. Obviously, once the catcher controls it, to be headed back, but you always kind of want to keep one eye on this throw just in case it does get past the pitcher. I know it doesn't happen a lot, but he's able to get in standing up here. So in any case, if you're in this position as shortstop or second base, you back that throw up, you can probably get that runner there on that throw. So a couple other good hits. Here's Toll with another bomb to the fence. That's about 240-foot fly ball here. It didn't really matter. Obviously, he hit this ball over his head, but if you're a runner on third, we want to be tagging up. You see Marco going back there, and once we get past him, he's just walking in easily. And one other example, I think an extra base hit here, Jonathan had. And I'm going to play this one for a little while. Actually, I want to backtrack this a bit because Jonathan's a bat. He had pulled the first two foul, and I just thought this was a really good piece of hitting on his part to make the adjustment. There's the ball foul. But you see when he actually does hit this in play, he kind of stays through it a little bit. So realizing what the pitcher's doing, realizing what his swing's up to, able to really lace that one into the gap. And these line drives into the gap like that, they're going to play huge dividends for us as a team. So we've scored a bunch of runs in that inning. We batted around, which is great. We do that, we're going to have a lot of success as a team. We did make one out here on the base pass when Alex is hitting. So Ethan gets out at third here. The key thing is we always want to slide when there's a play. I'm always yelling down, so make sure you listen to that when the throw is coming in. If we back this up, you'll see Ethan kind of comes to complete stop as he's rounding second. You see right there before he starts going. So he loses quite a bit of momentum on that play. So the key thing is to point, really pick up on what the base runner or what the base coaches are telling you. I was yelling go there when he slowed up. That probably was the difference. That and sliding would have been the difference between getting safe and out. When we have these big innings, there's no telling how many more runs we could have scored. So every out that we make on the base paths just puts a dent in that. So we just want to keep that in mind. So on the defensive side, here's a pop-up to Alex. I think a really good play. If we watch this again, you'll see that he gets his helmet off right away, like immediately, and he's got the bat to contend with there, and he's able to navigate that successfully and still make the catch. So not the easiest catch in the world. So we struggled a little bit in the second inning. We brought Luke in. Jonathan walked a few guys. One thing we haven't really talked much about, pitch calls and that sort of thing. One thing I've done just sort of strategically is I really want the catchers and pitchers communicating in terms of the pitch calling, and I've put a lot of that responsibility and onus on the catchers. And I know there's other teams that do it where the coaches call every pitch and the location and all that sort of stuff. I think that's a valuable skill for a catcher to learn, and I think the best way to learn it is just through experience, and for the pitcher as well, just to understand and get on the same wavelength as the catcher. So I've seen just a lot of just great communication between pitcher and catcher in terms of talking these things through, on the field, in between batters, catcher going out to the pitcher, even in the dugout, and I think that's fantastic, and it's all part of the learning process. And I know full well that we're going to make mistakes along the way. Here's an example where Luke was pitching, and this was, I think, the second to last hitter in their lineup, and Luke just kind of blew two fastballs, and this guy had no business of swinging, didn't want anything to do with the pitch, and then we came back with the changeup, and this guy was able to. Changeup was high there, and he ended up walking on this play. So I think the thing to note here, just for future reference, we get to those players in the bottom of the lineup, we just want to keep attacking, especially if they demonstrate that they can't touch the fastball. We want to keep pounding it in, and we don't even want to waste one pitch. The changeups, in terms of, it's a great two-strike pitch, especially to a very aggressive hitter. And you see, we've struck out guys in the past on those things, and that's really the place to do it. Early on in the count to a 3 or 4 hitter, or someone on the more aggressive side in terms of how they're swinging, and we're hoping that the catcher and pitcher pick up on that. So, just to let everyone know, we're being a little hands off, but we're being intentional with helping the pitchers and catchers develop in terms of this pitch calling. It's not rocket science. I don't fully understand why coaches feel like they have to do it. It's a skill that can be taught and can be learned, and I think the earlier the better. So it's just to keep that in mind. So here's a play where Luke was pitching. We had a runner in second. We weren't throwing home on this one. Really, on these balls into the infield, really the key thing here is we're just trying to get the ball in the second and prevent the runner to go any further. This should be a very, very routine throw and a routine play. So all we're trying to do is just make sure that the runner doesn't get any further. So a couple things that we're seeing here that kind of go awry is Kale kind of puts a little bit less on the throw that we would like, so the throw ends up being lower than we would have hoped. The other thing here is Aiden, I believe it was Aiden, setting up shop here like a first baseman with one foot on the base, and you see he's very closed off and he's trying to backhand this play already. There's really no need for him to have his foot on the base. He could be really in front of the base with his chest facing Kale, and in that case he's able to move. If this throw was low, he'd be able to move up and really catch it. My goal in terms of these catches, and I've talked to the boys about this, is we really want to kind of catch it between our shoulders, and we want to move our body. So if we have one foot anchored to second base, it makes it much more difficult, and there's really no need to do it. So on this play, we just really want to stop the ball. And the second baseman's job should be thinking, at all costs, I got to be able to stop this ball from getting past me. And the backhand play, there's really no backstop here. The other thing to note is, and we've talked about this in the past, is the right fielder needs to be coming in on this play. And I can show you an example, multiple examples where Addison did just that as a right field. So it's not just elite teams that do this well. Every team should be able to do this. as long as they're aware. I believe this is Isaac in right field. Pretty much doesn't move this entire play until the ball kind of scoots past and he realizes that. So he should really be on the edge of the dirt here. And with him, if he were standing there and this ball got past, this runner would not be going. Just for the simple fact that Isaac's presence there on the edge of the grass. So, we talk about everyone's got a job to do on these plays, and that truly is the case. So, we just want to make sure that we're alert and aware of what's going on and doing our job. But first line of defense is that second baseman, moving his body and stopping the ball, and then the right fielder's got to be in a position to prevent that ball from getting any further past. So there's some example of really good base running by Alex. Runner on second, ground ball ahead of him. I've seen us kind of run into outs in the past. The important thing is you see, and I've also seen examples where the runner on second goes too close back to second base and then is not able to get to third on the throw. I think really Alex is in perfect position here. He's about 1/3 of the way. You can see here that he's very much eyeing what their third baseman is doing, and then see how he's inching forward there. And basically, as this guy is making this move towards first base, he's moving towards third to get that extra base. So it's something to keep in mind. I thought that was a really nice job. On the flip side, on base running, some things that we've seen here, just as again, in terms of our team strategy, I'm perfectly fine with the boys swinging away when there's a steal sign or the runners, running with the pitch. I think that gets the defense a lot of times put out of position, and we can get base hits that way. Now, the flip side of that is we're always exposing ourselves to get doubled up, and as base runners, we need to be aware that when we're going, and oftentimes the guys are running without a sign or whatever because they just get a great jump, and I'm perfectly fine with that. But as base runners, we need to be aware when that ball is hit, we got to find it, right? So we got to be alert, we got to be aware, we got to know the situations, especially if there's less than 2 outs. And a lot of times what I see is the base runners will be running so fast to steal the base that they don't recognize that there's a ball put in play, especially if you're in the air, and there's a chance that they might get doubled up unless the coach is screaming at them. So the key thing to note is these bats make a ton of noise when they're hit. You hear that bat, you need to pick up the ball. You need to be looking for it, and obviously know that's in the air. You need to be heading, back towards that base. So here's an example with Isaac. Aiden is hitting. He gets a good jump, ball's hit, and right about here, ball is pretty much at its apex, and he's picking up on this as a fly ball. I think probably Coach Steve is yelling at him to get back. So we got a little lucky here. He dropped it, trying to make the transition and throw to first. Alex did a nice job recognizing that. He would have scored either way, tagging up. But once the ball dropped, he got in easily. But in any case, we got to know that situation. There was another situation later in the game with Luke on second. Stealing third, ball's hit right about here. Obviously, Luke's got a great jump. He's running at full speed. I would hope that he would be able to kind of reverse his momentum by the time he gets to about here, even with that light post. But we end up seeing, I'm waving at him to get back, and he basically gets back all the way to third base. So he runs 140 odd feet on this play. Ball gets away. Luke doesn't do anything crazy. Kind of thought about getting to third, but went back to second, and that was perfectly fine. So something to keep in mind there. We've talked about this in the past, I think in the last video, in terms of the pickoff moves. Again, we've got Isaac here. The one thing I want to again point out is on the leadoffs, we've really practice is kind of step to the left foot, turn with the right, inch your way forward, but basically get to the point where you can one step and dive back to first base. And sometimes, like I think Coach Steve will tell you, when you can get more. He does a good job of that. This is something that literally everyone can practice in their backyard or at home or anywhere. You can practice getting a lead off, and just you need to inherently know whether or not you're too close or too far from the base. We don't want to get a situation where we end up getting to that spot and then end up keep inching forward. It's not like a steal where we're trying to steal third, where you are trying to get that forward momentum. We want to get to that spot and then get a good jump. A lot of times, what I see, and I think we see in this example with Isaac, he's inching forward almost like he's stealing third, and all his momentum is carrying forward. And once that pickoff move is going, he's caught the wrong way. So he gets back safely on this, but again, his momentum was carrying forward. Again, as we talk about the right-hand pitcher, we got to make sure that he's going home first. You look at his back foot. If his back foot comes off, you're going back. If his left foot comes up in the air, he's got to go home at that point, and you can run. So we're not just going on the first move here. So let's rewind that again. So you'll see he's kind of inching forward there, eager to steal, and we just don't want to get picked off. That's all. So I mentioned about our struggles in pitching in the second inning. One of the things that I really think helped settle this game down, Luke had the 7-pitch inning in the third, and I think 11-pitch inning in the fourth. He really helped himself in terms of defense. We talked about the pitchers helping themselves. Here was a strikeout to their big slugger, which I thought was really nice pitching. Again, he's got him with the fastball, and then 2 balls I think hit the mark perfectly, but the guy didn't bite, which was fine. That was a changeup, right on the outside corner. He didn't bite, and then he just went upstairs 2 in a row. So which I thought was really good. Recognized that he couldn't catch up to that one, so he just went back with the high heat even higher. So in my mind, like I say, that's pitching, and that's what pitching is all about. Understanding the hitter's weaknesses, mixing it up a bit, and just challenging him with your best stuff ultimately. And I thought that was great. And here's another example of Luke getting off the mound on a pop-up. This is behind the mound, which is usually a tough play, but I think with the flat mound and Luke got a good jump on it, got himself into a routine position to get himself out of that inning. Some good base running here by JR, I just wanted to point out. So he's stealing third, and there was an example I think earlier in the game was almost exactly the same as this. You see, so he gets the lead, got the momentum, and he's off. No way you're going to get him out, and they didn't even get a throw. So I love to see when guys are stealing third without a throw. Immediately after that, JR got here in a rundown. So I think the ball might hit the ump, but you see he didn't get too far away from the plate. JR is getting at full speed. So on third, my stance, as I tell the boys this a lot when I get over there, is I like to see a short primary lead and a good aggressive secondary lead. I think maybe we've gotten a little too conservative with our secondary leads more recently, so I want to take a look at that. But this ball being not that far away from the plate is not something we want to go on, and we definitely don't want to get out on the base paths. So the great thing here is you see at this point there's no one covering home. So I think JR recognized that. I called it out and told him to go, and he was able to get back, beat the throw before the catcher. So if we rewind this, something to learn from the defense is we can take a look at the first baseman during this play. So this guy basically had a key role in this play and could have been the one that tagged JR out, but to just watch as this play develops. Now he finally starts going in, but by then it's way too late. So you even saw the second baseman got in that play late. First baseman for the first 10 seconds of that play, did nothing. So we want to make sure we get that rundown. We've talked about this in practice. Everyone's got a job to play there, especially there's no one else on base, no one else to worry about. The whole team could have gotten this rundown if they wanted to. More base running stuff, and then, again, this is sometimes a bit tricky. I mean, this is a hard hit ball right back to the pitcher. One thing I want the boys to be aware of is if you can read the angle off of the bat, and it can often be important to note. If that's going to be on the ground, you see Kale is on first. Obviously, there's a force at second, so he starts moving with the jump, and then this ball gets to the pitcher's through the pitcher's legs, and we see Kale is stopping his momentum. Honestly, at this point, this should have been an easy force out with the shortstop charging this. Could have flipped it to second, but we were safe all around. So if we just watch this again, see some indecision here when it's a ground ball and we have to go. So we don't even want to lose half a second here. That could be the difference between being out and safe. And then Kale was on third later this inning, and there were 2 outs. And again, when they're on third, I'm always telling the boys the situation. So we just need to know in the moment, we need to remember. So you see him running back. The other thing is, Jonathan was running with this pitch, and with that ball dropping, I was sending him to go, and for some reason he stopped. But anyways, if you get that good jump around second, I like to see a good aggressive turn around third, and I'm usually pretty aggressive on sending those guys home because it's a very difficult play to make to get him out at home. And I think we would have potentially ended the game early. I think if some of these if that run would have scored. So here's a play with Jonathan. On third base, JR makes a good throw. The thing to note here, I mean, the base runner slides past the base, and Jonathan does sort of the swipe tag. It's hard to say whether or not the ump would have called him out, but we do. If you see a play like that where the guy's sliding very late into the base, he was extremely late, you can keep that tag on his foot, and keep that momentum there towards him, and if he's off the base, he technically should be out. So again, if you're the guy sliding, make sure you slide a little bit earlier. You don't want to pop off the base like that. He definitely was off the base there for a fraction of a second. The ump's not in a great position to make that call, but we may get that call at some point. So here's one thing I stressed earlier on when we talked with the team in the offseason in terms of my minimum expectations is I want the boys hustling, running everything out, just all the time, just hustling on everything. And everyone knows this. We've talked about it time and time again. It's a huge sticking point with me. For the most part, a couple of things that you see in the big league players that we don't want to mimic is sometimes you see big leaguers that don't really run out routine grounders. It's a long season and they just choose not to do it. I hate to see it. And also on pop-ups, you don't always see them running. But in any case, so here's a hit by Aiden. First few steps, his pop-up is very casual, getting out of the base. But the thing to note here is this was a very difficult play with these infielders and very close to being dropped. That shortstop caught the ball over his head there. So, maybe Aiden doesn't get the second, but we just want to run those things out. You make a turnaround first, and who knows what might happen. So, as you get on further levels in high school or whatever, you just want to show your coach that you're always hustling. It can never hurt you. So this was a play This is a play with JB. So Rich had a drop third strike. JB was on third. You know, I sent Jonathan simply because there were two outs. So if Rich were to get thrown out at first, which if we didn't send Jonathan, that throw was going to go to first, and more likely, a pretty good chance that he's going to get out there. So we really had no risk in sending Jonathan. And in fact, Jonathan was very likely safe on this play, as you can see there. But in any case, the one thing perhaps we could have gotten away with is a better secondary lead, and maybe you see where Jonathan's there, right there, and maybe he's safe easily. So, like I said, we don't. Another thing we talked about is we don't necessarily complain about these calls, even though we all can see here that even in the moment we knew that Jonathan was safe. The key thing here is you just make that, you do the little things to make that safe by a mile and make it a very easy call for the ump, and then that can be the difference. So any of these close plays, especially when these games drag on, I think even this game we saw the strike zone expanded as the game wore on. Some of these borderline calls that were called out, the ump is human. The ump at some point wants to go home. So I think we just got to keep that in mind. Some of these calls are going to go our way and some aren't. But there's little things we can do to improve our chances of being safe. It's something that we can learn from. So we had one inning where Kale's first inning pitching, where we actually gave them 6 outs, and that's not going to be beneficial for our long-term success. We don't want to be making multiple outs in an inning, and we've noticed in the past these things sort of go in a downward spiral. So, but rather than me just kind of hammering on you boys for everything you're doing wrong, and that's not really the point of these videos, is I want to be able to put you in a position to hopefully learn from these mistakes, and I wanted to put you in a position where you can be your most successful. So if there is something where we could have played that particular play a little bit differently, something to think about, I want to give you the chance of having the highest probability of success. So, and ultimately you may be in a perfect position in terms of playing the ball perfectly, and you may get a bad hop, and those things happen, and we just got to roll with it. This is a situation where, when I look at these things carefully, Alex is putting himself in a really good position to get this ball. It does squirt away from him. He's got his other hand in there. His back is flat. He's fielding the ball out in front of him. If anything, I see this ball ends up bouncing 6 times. And when you're playing on these all dirt infields, the more bounces the ball gets, the greater chance that one of them is going to be a bad hop. So I think if anything, in terms of lessons learned, we may want to charge this ball and kind of eliminate the hops, and then try to play that ball off the ground as quickly as possible, as close to the ground as possible on either the 5th or even that 6th bounce, and play through it. And I think that's, as long as you're doing those things correctly, you're going to give yourself a really good chance of making that play. And, if it doesn't come up, then you just got to chalk it up and move on to the next one. So that was all I really noticed on this play. Here's a play where Rich got it at third. We had a runner tagging for home and also the runner at third. And we had this, again, there were 2 outs here. That was the second out. And then we had really a chance to get out of this inning. I actually, in terms of how most teams play this, the pitcher is really supposed to be backing up throws to third and home. And this is really kind of the first baseman's job to get this tag. I've found that, at least the way that we play, it's good to have the pitcher there, because I think that, given there's not a ton of room behind home plate and third, typically where we play, that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to be backing up those throws. But I think as we move forward, we'll probably likely have to change that up. But so Kale does the right thing in terms of cutting this ball off. I think the thing that cost him is sort of the double clutch, as the runner was kind of making this pause. So if we can get this guy dead to rights, we're going to get that. We're going to get in the rundown. 90% chance we're going to convert that out, and we're going to be out of the inning. So I think the double clutch kind of hurt, because then the throw sailed over the third baseman's head. So we just want to be very careful. I mean, we made all the right decisions in terms of leading up to the play. It just comes down to execution. And later on the same inning, again, this is a big hitter, hit a mile-long pop-up. So JR is calling this ball, which is fine. Like, he got his helmet off, saw the ball, calls for it. The thing to note on these pop-ups is, what I've read is they tend to move towards the middle of the field. And as I mentioned in last week's video, these plays where the ball is around here or here, we want that pitcher at least making a good attempt at going at that ball, especially with this flat mound. I think it's, KO at this point is just like any other infielder. Doesn't have the mound to contend with. The other thing is this ball is in the air for so long. We'd like to see the first baseman come in on this play. And I think we end up seeing Alex does cover first. So I think sometimes the first baseman tends to get locked to first base and not want to leave that position. But it ends up being a very difficult play because JR is having to come forward. The other thing is, once JR has called it, and KO has sort of given up on it, but then he sort of gets himself back into the play, and that proximity can sometimes hurt on these sort of pop-ups. So, you either got to go for it or you got to make sure you're out of the way. And I think we see KO kind of in no man's land here, and the ball ends up dropping. So, ideally, KO, don't be afraid to call someone off if you've got a better read on it, and like the shortstop's got that. Got that veto power. The center fielder's got that veto power, in the outfield. And on this play, the pitcher or first baseman can call off that catcher. It's very difficult for the catcher to be going out, moving forward to try to get that pop-up. But that same batter, later on that inning, we've been throwing out guys at third lately, which has been fantastic to see. I think it's an example. It might be an example where the ump again calling these borderline plays out. But I think actually the runner's lead leg kind of misses the bag and goes through the bag, and it's really his back leg that's going towards the bag. The great thing is Aiden, throw was right on the money, and Aiden gets the throw and puts the tag down, which was great. And you at that point, like I've said many times, it was kind of 50-50 plays. The ump a lot of times is just kind of rewarding a very good throw and a very good tag, and the defense will get the benefit of the doubt. We've seen this time and time again. So this is the play where Marco hits a single. We had a runner on third. Luke is heading back to tag, which is the right thing to do. JR, I think he did the right thing here in terms of holding that second even after the ball dropped. The thing is, he doesn't necessarily have to be back here all the way to the base. But I do think that the center fielder is close enough and this ball is in front of him that running a third would have led to an out. And we did have an out at third earlier in the game on a similar play. But I think he does the right thing in terms of reading that ball has kind of hit the shallow center. But he could be kind of right here where the shortstop is, or right behind where this pitcher is, and still make that decision. So they ended up having their infield in here, and we hit this line drive to the shortstop. What ends up happening is JR starts going with the pitch, ends up getting back to third. Kale gets pretty deep on his way to second before getting back to first, and we didn't end up getting doubled off in any situation. But the thing is, probably to learn from the defense here as we replay this, you'll see the third baseman sort of saunters back to third base. Um, and really the defense's goal here is to try to, get a hard hit ball and ideally double off a runner. So the third baseman should really be sprinting back to third to get that throw and calling for the ball, which he doesn't do. The first baseman, who isn't that far away from first base, he ends up kind of standing in front of it, but again, doesn't really call for it, even though Kale is pretty far from the base. So he just made the catch. The shortstop instantly knew that he wanted to go somewhere with it, but the third baseman is, so far away from the bag. There's no play there, and you see Kale is almost halfway to second. So one of these two defenders, probably the first baseman, should be calling for the ball at this point, and he doesn't do that. And the third baseman is just kind of slowly walks backwards towards third, so neither runner was out. So if we're in that situation on defense, we want to keep that in mind. Also, we constantly say you got to see those line drives through when you're running, and just be cautious when you see that ball on those line drives hit before moving too aggressively towards the next base. So this was the play I was alluding to when JR was on second. So this is a play where actually Isaac was out at third. And this center fielder made a great throw. And again, here's a play where it's a bang-bang play. Pretty easy to tell Isaac had his foot on the bag, but the ump's kind of giving the benefit of the doubt here. I think the only thing that we could have done differently here, well, two things. So one is you see Isaac's secondary lead is not very far from second base. So that basically should have been his primary lead. His secondary lead should have been about here. And then he gets to third base easily. The other thing is, compared to Marco's fly ball, which is higher in the air, this ball pretty clearly going to drop in front of the center field. So again, if you're a base runner, you pick up on that launch angle, pick up on the trajectory of the ball, how hard it's going, and just have, it's sort of instincts, right? It's sort of knowing whether or not that's going to be a hit or not. The earlier you can pick up on that, the better chance you have of getting a third. So you see Isaac has to stop there, kind of loses all his momentum, and is just starting as the center fielder is getting the ball. But again, it was a heck of a play by the center fielder. Then in the last inning, we had a 1-2-3 inning, which was great. I could still make my flight to New Jersey. I thought this was a great play by Rich at third on this slow roller. And, this is what we've coached up time and time again, so it's great to have an example of this, is we want our third baseman to be aggressive on these balls in between third and short. The reason being, as you play it, you can see exactly why. So Rich has it, he's running towards it, and all his momentum is going towards first. Versus if this ball gets past him and gets to Luke, Luke's going this way, and this was kind of slow roller. It's a much tougher play for the shortstop to get deeper in the hole. So we never want to get in this position where it's kind of like the third baseman and the shortstop aren't sure who's going to get the ball. The third baseman should always be cutting across to try to get it, and the shortstop is the second line of defense there. There should really be no uncertainty or ambiguity about that play. They should both be going for it. And then I thought this was a great play to end the game. We saw Alex that made that error at second. And then, like we said before, we just move on to the next play. There you see, him getting right out of his spot there to get that ball. He's got a good throwing angle. Marco sets up with a good target, and the game. And I still made my flight, so it was very good. So, all in all, a great game. And 21-12. The game went on a lot longer. They probably scored more runs than we would have hoped, but I think a lot of good positives there. So, anyways, I'll see you guys tonight, and hopefully, we can take these lessons and keep moving onward and upward. All right, take care.